Wheel of Time community, and welcome to the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Tim.
And together we're going to walk through Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time book series. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome.
So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this is a reread. So we assume you've read the entire series and there will be spoilers.
Yes, there will.
You have been warned.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, what are we going to be doing in today's episode?
In this episode, we're going to be covering chapters 11, 12, and 13 of The Eye of the World. In these chapters, the boys realize that real adventures aren't nearly as much fun as the stories make them sound. We get our first dealings with people from outside of Emond's Field, and there's channeling all over the place. Chapter 11 is called The Road to Taren Ferry, and the icon is a spooky tree.
Okay.
The group gallops for their lives as they're being chased by a drag car. Rand desperately hopes that Bella can keep up, afraid that Eggwin will be left behind if she can't. They stop briefly for Maureen to wash away their fatigue, and she comments on how strong Bella is, and she's the least tired of them all. The drag car is still after them, so Maureen creates a dense fog to hide them, and they make their way to Taren Ferry. And Lan wakes the ferryman to demand that he take them across the river.
That was brief. Let's talk about the main thing that happens in this chapter, and that is that Rand channels at Bella.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious that this is the first time Rand touches a source, so let me read these 3 quotes together, and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
All right, so the first one is, with all his heart and desperation, he silently shouted at Bella to run like the wind, silently tried to will strength into her. Run! His skin prickled and his bones felt as if they were freezing, ready to split open. The light help her, run! And Bella ran. The second quote is, you were right about your Bella, Rand, Maureen said from where she stood by the mare. She has a good heart and as much stubbornness as the rest of you Two Rivers folk. Strange as it seems, she may be the least weary of all. And then the third quote is, stout Bella ran with neck outstretched and tail and mane streaming in the wind of her running, matching the larger horses every stride. The Aes Sedai must have done something more than simply ridding her of fatigue.
Yeah, I wonder.
I mean, the first time through you might not catch it, but, any subsequent readings, you're like, oh, definitely, I know what this is.
It's funny because actually my first time through, when we got through this, I actually thought it was Eggwin. Because Eggwin I thought okay. Eggwin, it was the first time Eggwin channel, but now we find out later that no, it was Rand.
Yeah, that makes sense. But, yeah. I mean, you definitely know that something's going on.
Right. And this is the first time we see Rand channel. He's desperate to make sure Eggwin doesn't fall behind. Like the whole time he's just thinking like she can't fall behind because if she does, then I'm going to, it's.
He's afraid that they're going to leave her behind if she can't keep up.
Exactly.
Because Lan didn't want her around in the first place.
So we see him he has this desperation that he's never had before.
Right.
And later Maureen explains that that's one of the things that often causes people, wilders, to channel for the first time is that absolute desperation.
Yeah. When she is talking to Nynaeve later, spoiler, she explains, that there's something that you needed more than anything or wanted more than anything you needed, previously in your life.
Exactly.
And that's what kind of sparks it for the first time. You can especially tell that that's the case here by the part where it says his skin prickled and his bones felt as if they were freezing, ready to split open. Because channeling does have a physical effect, especially before you've learned how to channel properly, how to harness the power. And we'll see, in a few chapters, the physical, after effects of his first time channeling. I mean, I don't know. There's not that much else that happens in this chapter.
Nothing really important.
What else did you want to talk about for chapter 11?
Well, Lan has a little bit of a line here where he gives us a little bit of information. We find out that Lan does not need to be restored like the horses do.
And the rest of them.
And the rest of it,
fatigue away, yeah.
And also we find out that Maureen can't wash the fatigue away from herself.
Right.
So we're starting to get a rule structure set up here, how healing and refreshing and just the power in general works. You can work on other people, but not yourself.
Right. So, in a couple books, we'll see when the Amyrlin is talking to Nynaeve and Eggwin on the boat to Tarvalon. and how
Right.
she's able to like float someone else, but an Aes Sedai can't make themselves fly.
Right.
Or like things like that. Like the power doesn't work on themselves for whatever reason.
Right. Which is important to know later.
Yeah. The only other thing that I really had to say about this chapter, this very, very short chapter, is just how prejudiced the Emond's Fielders are against Taren Ferry folks specifically.
Yeah.
That comes up over and over again. It's like they almost use Taren Ferry folk as like a not a curse word, but like a slang term for terrible people or shystery people.
Yeah. It's like we're not one of those people, at least. You know,
And
like
it's
the
like
lowest of the low.
they've never even been to Taren Ferry. Like Rand mentions that he's met one or two, but he's never been there. So they have no idea what Taren Ferry is really like.
Right.
There's just this inherent prejudice that's bred into the Emond's Fielders.
Yeah.
Which is true not just of the Taren Ferry folk, but of all sorts of people we see. You know, the Aes Sedai, and when we come across the Tinkers, and
Oh, yeah.
there's just all these people groups that this small, cloistered, sheltered little town has taught these people to be so
Suspicious
prejudiced
of.
against and
Yeah.
suspicious of. Yeah. And that's about it for chapter 11. To be honest,
Yeah.
11 and 12 did not need a chapter break. I don't understand why they're two separate chapters. Maybe the editor wanted to split them because chapter 12 is running a little long.
Especially for back then. Yeah.
Yeah, like with the two chapters together, it is a long chapter. I'll grant you that. And this is the first book in the series. So maybe that's why, but really there's no reason for these to be two chapters. I mean, it splits in an awkward position where Lan is like, okay, well, we're going to go wait for you at the ferry. And that's it. And then they go, wait, you know, it picks up the next chapter with them at the ferry. It doesn't make any sense to me from a literary perspective why these chapters are split. So I guess we should move on to chapter 12.
Yeah, and because we have 3 chapters that we're covering today, we're going to skip our usual jokey sponsor spot for time's sake and move straight into the next chapter, which is chapter 12, and it's called Across the Tearin. And the icon for this chapter is the Flame of Tar-Valon.
They all head to the ferry to wait for the ferryman, and they're all a little grumbly except for the Aes Sedai and Eggwin. Lan tells the boys to make their weapons obvious, and Tom flashes his knives to put on a good show of looking menacing. Master Hightower and his men are a little shifty, but they make it across the river without incident. On the other side of the Tearin, Lan lures the men onto the bank, and Maureen causes a whirlpool to sink the ferry. Maureen cloaks the river with fog to obscure their route, and there's a tense moment with the group that ends with Maureen saying that she will not explain all her actions to them. They make camp in one of Lan's many hidey holes, and the two women go off by themselves. Maureen tells Eggwin that she can channel, and Eggwin gets her first lesson in the power. She manages a feeble flicker of light, and she excitedly tells Rand that she's going to be an Aes Sedai.
Again, like we're still there in Taren Ferry, but we get this moment with Lan that I always just kind of like love. Like, I'll read this real quick. Fog swirled around the warder like smoke as he leapt from his saddle and mounted the stairs and rose to the front door as high above the street as above their heads. I don't know, just Lan jumping off his horse in this like swirling fog, this like, it's just so badass. I mean, he's the wolf is how we always hear him described. Now he's like this wolf coming out of the fog. It's kind of cool.
He is an imposing figure.
Yes, he is.
All the men, well, except Lan, are all complaining about, the weather. They're damp and they're tired. But Eggwin still seems excited.
Yeah.
And Rand thinks to himself, there must be a difference in what you saw, it seemed to him, depending on whether you sought adventure or had it forced on you. And that's so true.
Yeah, it is.
Attitude makes such a big difference. Even if something is very, very difficult, if it's something that you chose for yourself and it's worth it to you, then you put up with it and, you're fine. But if you never wanted it and you come across just a little bit of a challenge, it's like, screw this isn't fun. Just your perspective makes such a big difference.
It sure does. So the imposing feel of like armed people in the fog is kind of cool. Like we got, we got this big old axe. We've got the sword. So like that's really kind of cool. And then we have Tom who flashes his knives, and his skills are always outshining everyone else.
Definitely.
And even Maureen is impressed. Well, or at least she's amused because she kind of chuckles a bit. The way it's read here is a delightful little laugh floated from Maureen in response to Tom.
Yeah, it's really cute to see the way they interact once you know their story arc.
Yeah.
It's fun to see the little
beginnings
moments
of things
with each other.
I agree.
So when they're on the ferry, Lan and Rand talk about strangers.
Yeah.
And whether or not the men would have actually done violence towards the group. Lan calls Rand out on, I thought you Two Rivers folk were always talking about the Taren Ferry folk and blah, blah, blah. And Rand's like, well, yeah, we say that, but I never thought they'd actually go through with it. And so they just kind of talk about people outside of Emond's Field and the nature of strangers. And Lan says, the quickest to harm a stranger are the soonest to think a stranger will harm them, which explains why he had them go through the show of looking, menacing and well-armed.
Yeah.
And I like how it says, Rand decided he had better stop thinking that he knew anything at all of what people were like beyond his own village. He really needs to remember that. In fact, he should share with his friends so everybody knows that.
Yeah. It's it's the life place he's in right now. Like it's maybe I don't actually know everything, but still it's kind of frustrating.
That moment of discovering that you don't know as much as you thought you know.
Yeah. It can be kind of profound.
Yeah, and he's at the right age for it.
So when they get to the other side of the river, and Maureen throws up the fog that covers the whole river and keeps going. We have this moment where she's a bit proud of herself for the cloud cover that she creates, but. Right. And you can misconstrue that sometimes. Maybe people think that Maureen's kind of stuck up on herself. But I think it's more about cluing the reader into how powerful she is compared to other Aes Sedai.
Right.
Because before the Supergirls show up, the three, she's one of the strongest currently active Aes Sedai in the tower.
Yeah, she definitely is.
And we don't have any clue about that because this is the first book. I mean, so this comment, I think, is more about putting that in context than it is to give us a personality quirk.
Definitely. And of course, after the Supergirls, we have a whole different ranking system.
Yeah, because they kind of
comes later.
kind of mess the system up. Yeah. So we have this tense moment after Maureen kind of sinks the ferry, and she's just like, "Don't make me explain every little decision," because the Edmund's villagers are kind of freaked out at what they just saw happen.
Yeah, they are.
So it's just.
It's kind of funny because it's Maureen's turn to lose her patience.
Yeah.
Like this whole time, Lan has been a grumpy pants and has had 0 patience with the Emond's Fielders. And Maureen's just been like, it's fine. Just the wheel weaves, it's the wheel wills, blah, blah, blah.
And now she's like, I'm done. Like, no more questions, I kill you all.
Literally, right? Like, just wait a minute.
Yeah.
So later on, after they... start to make camp, we get a portion where Maureen is channeling to Eggwin, and she talks about the Reds gentling men. And the book says, Tom growled deep in his throat, and Rand shifted uncomfortably. And it's just a very, very quick line. It's easy to miss, but there's so much backstory that we don't know about Tom. And, your first time through, when you don't know what's going on, like I said, it's very easy to miss. But when you do know what's happening, you realize that there's so many layers.
Yes, there are.
There's so much there that you discover on subsequent reading.
So one of the things that I continually run into when I'm listening to podcasts or reading things online, it's the question of why people keep coming back to the Wheel of Time again and again and again. There's so many books.
Right.
But people don't just read it once and done. They come back again and again. And it's moments like this with Tom where we get a throwaway line about his reaction to Red Oj gentling men. But when you read it again later, knowing what happens with Tom's nephew and everything that happens with the Red Eyes going after him, this has a whole new context for you.
Right.
And this isn't the only moment like that in the series. It's all over the place. It's something Robert Jordan does really, really well, is he hides these little moments, and you come back and it's like Easter eggs all over the place.
Yeah, like I feel like there's something similar when you read Harry Potter. When you've read the later books, you know, 5, 6, 7, you go back and you read the first few books and you'll find these little tiny throwaway things peppered in that all of a sudden you're like, hey, that comes back in a really big way.
An important way, yeah.
Yeah, and it's this fun sense of discovery and being in on the secret in a way that I think is definitely present in Wheel of Time, where you have these little things that don't mean anything to you the first time you read them, but on subsequent readings when you come back, it's like,
completely different light.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
Maureen tells Eggwin that it's best if she guide Eggwin through her first touching of the source, to avoid the unpleasant effects that come to those that must find their own way. And what she's talking about is the fever and the delirium symptoms that we'll see Rand go through in a couple chapters.
Yeah.
I think we might have already talked about that. But yeah, like after touching the source the first time and channeling over Bella, obviously it was unguided. It was purely accidental.
Right.
So he does suffer these symptoms that Maureen is trying to help Eggwin get out of.
Right.
And then she also says, and I thought this was funny, you may go far, perhaps even the Emerald seat one day, if you study hard and work hard. So we've already talked about Robert Jordan and his blatant foreshadowing with a 2x4 in this book.
Yes.
And he continues to do so. Again, I don't know if you can call it foreshadowing. It's that on the nose. But there you go.
Yeah. That wraps up chapter 12. Next we come to chapter 13, where the icon is Maureen's staff, and the title is Choices.
Okay.
I want to make a note that we get a brand new map here, in the printed version at least, that expands our world out a little bit.
Yeah, it's always good to say, hey, new map, new stuff, yay.
Yay.
All right, here's the summary. Maureen heals them of their fatigue again, and Eggwin makes fun of the boys for already being tired of adventure. On the way to Berlin, Lan gives the boys lessons on how to use their weapons, and Tom teaches them some gleeman tricks. Eggwin continues her lessons with Maureen, and we learn more about Aes Sedai. Maureen also lets us know that there is another in Emond's Field that can channel. Eggwin unbraids her hair, and Rand flips out, and they get into a shouting match over it, during which he calls Aes Sedai dark friends in front of everyone. Later, Matt thinks that they've outrun the Trollocs, and maybe they don't have to go to Tar Valon. Maureen threatens to destroy them before she lets the Dark One get to them. It's a tense group that reaches Berlin, but the Two Rivers folk perk up at the sight of a real city. Maureen warns them to guard their tongues and use her and Lan's aliases. The gate guard tells them that there are children of the light in Berlin, and that the false dragon in Gildan has killed Aes Sedai and is moving an army towards Tyr. Rand and Tom talk about why Tyr is significant and the prophecies of the dragon. The chapter ends with the innkeeper welcoming the group to the Stag and Lion.
They all resist being healed,
Except Eggwin.
except for Eggwin, of course. And by they, I mean the men, with the exception of Lan.
No, even Lan. He's like, no, don't tire yourself.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
that's
fine.
right. He's like, no, I'm good.
Long suffering.
But when Maureen gets to Tom, specifically, she smiles this kind of mocking smile
yeah,
at his scowl. And it's really cute and sweet to see this interaction, knowing how it all ends with those two.
Yeah,
so,
I think we've sort of made it obvious that we're going to point all of these out.
Yeah.
Just because I love their arc. I really do.
And to be honest, like the first time through the series, I really did not like Maureen. I really did not like her at all.
You know what? Neither did I, to be honest.
But
That's weird.
But the more I read it, like I understand that some of her like her curtness and some of her shortness is just frustration at these country bumpkins.
Yeah, well, and I feel like now that I'm older, I'm more on her side because I am also frustrated with the youngins.
Yeah.
I mean, our characters are great, but some of them can be very frustrating and very annoying, and you just kind of want to shake them and be like, grow up already. So
Get off my
I think
lawn.
get off my lawn. I'm much more sympathetic towards Maureen than I was the first time. Like, I did not trust Maureen.
Oh, no.
For
No.
books and books and books the first time through. And, you know, now that I know what her motivations are, I'm much warmer towards her.
Yeah.
When they see the first farms north of the Tearin, Perrin observes that they're no different than they are back home. But then Matt says they must be different because they're north of the Tearin. And it's just, they believe so much that people from the outside are different. And they refuse to believe otherwise, even though they can see with their own eyes the evidence that they are not different. And it calls into question the entire concept of other.
Yeah.
Because the reality is people are a lot more similar than we tend to believe them to be.
Absolutely.
You know, we always think of our communities and our groups as us, and everyone who is not in those communities as them.
Right.
And that distancing of between people groups is really detrimental, and it really behooves us to remember that those others and them, everyone that we put into those boxes are actually very, very similar. When you boil it down, we all have the same basic desires. You know, we want safety, and we want love, and we want a sense of connectedness. And it doesn't matter what race or religion or geographical location or socioeconomical group you come from. When you boil us down to our cores, we are very, very similar. And we would all benefit to keep that in mind.
Yeah. It's one reason that we recommend, especially young people, travel.
To get out of their cloistered communities.
Because when I was younger, I always thought that was because, you know, travel the world, it'll expand your mind. You'll learn new things you never learned before. But it's actually, but one of those things that you learn is how everyone is very much the same. Like yes, there's different things between countries.
Yeah, we look different, we talk different, but we don't necessarily feel different.
Exactly. We all have the same kind of motivations when it comes to our personal selves. So, yeah. So as they're traveling along the road, Lan takes some time the first night to like show the boys how to use their weapons. And Maureen sees this and approves, so they kind of make it something they do every night.
Right.
And in this moment, we find out just how scarily good the boys are with the bow and arrow.
They are. They really are.
Yeah. And as Lan kind of like shows Rand some stuff with the sword so he doesn't cut his own foot off, he talks to Rand about this thing where you like imagine a flame. You feed all your emotions into it. It's the flame in the void. But Rand recognizes it and calls it the flame in the void as Lan is explaining it. And Lan's like, so you know about this? And he's like, yeah, my dad taught me.
Right.
And Rand's like, Lan's reaction to that is, interesting.
File that away for later.
Again, so Lan is already clued into how bad of a badass Tam Althor is.
Right.
So there's that.
But yeah, he lets them know different techniques on how to use their weapons so that they'll have a chance at defending themselves.
Yeah, more than just pretend.
Yeah, exactly. Fooling around.
Yeah. So we have there's this thing here, and it kind of put me off a little bit. So I realized that most of the Eye of the World is through Rand's point of view.
Right.
So if Rand doesn't see it, we don't see it.
Okay.
However, so we get this scene here where they're camped for the night, and Rand is watching Eggwin brush her hair. And Rand counts out 100 strokes. Son, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's a little creepy.
That's creepy stalkery, like...
Rand does a lot of spying in this first bit.
Yeah, I mean, trying... It's just... And again, coming back to, you know, I realize it's his point of view. We don't really get to see anything about Eggwin or learn anything about her if we don't see Rand doing it. It's just unfortunate that Rand's kind of stalkery.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if Robert Jordan just put the 100 strokes in there because it's something that women used to do way back when.
Yeah.
Because I think later there's another mention of that with Elaine. brushing her hair with 100 strokes?
I think you're right.
Do you know why women used to do that?
I do not. Please enlighten me.
Okay, so you were supposed to brush your hair with 100 strokes because it made it look glossy. And the reason it makes it look glossy is because as you brush your hair, you take the oils from your scalp and it travels down the strand of the hair to the drier ends. So, I mean, that's great unless you have really oily skin and an oily scalp, and then it just makes your hair greasy and you need to shampoo more often. Which is why people don't do that anymore.
Got it. Okay.
Also, it's damaging for your hair. But it used to be a thing, like back in the, I'd say 50s and earlier, which would have been, I'm assuming, when Robert Jordan was young. I mean,
yes.
I don't know exactly when he was born, but it sounds about right. So it definitely would have been a thing that he'd have heard of. Maybe his wife did it. So maybe that's why he put it in the book.
Okay.
But it is a little stalkery.
Yeah, just a bit.
Anyway, speaking about hair, Rand is really upset about Eggwin not braiding her hair. I mean, really, really upset. And to his credit, I understand why. Because Rand did not choose this. He did not choose to leave the Two Rivers. He never wanted to leave the Two Rivers. He misses the Two Rivers. He's grieving for the Two Rivers.
That's true. That's very true.
And here, Eggwin is immediately casting off everything she's been raised with, and he feels that she's just throwing this thing away that he loves and he misses. So I do understand his reaction. You know, like people. Well, I mean, you had this experience when you went off to college. Yeah. And you came back to your small town, and you told your dad about, hey, we have an actual movie theater right across the street, and we don't have to drive 45 minutes to the grocery store.
It's all right here.
Yeah, and all this opportunity, and your dad kind of felt like you were throwing it in his face, like, what, the way you grew up wasn't good enough for you?
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't know if he's listening or not, but to be fair, as a kid, that's definitely the way I thought. Like, I would come home and I'd be like, oh, I got all this stuff and all this great world. It's great. It's wonderful. I'm doing this thing in college. And my parents were like, yeah, and?
And I mean, the reality is just you were excited.
Exactly.
And again, Edwin has literally just found out that she can channel. She's excited.
Yeah, her life's changing in really cool ways.
You know, she immediately gloms on to Maureen as like this mentor, whether Maureen wants it or not.
Right,
and
true.
She doesn't. But, you know, from Eggwin's point of view, it's like, this woman is going to take me under her wing and teach me all the things.
And I'm going to be an Aes Sedai in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, she's excited and she's trying to emulate Maureen.
Right.
But, yeah, from Rand's point of view, it's like her taking this thing he loves, which was his life in Emond's field, and throwing it away like it's garbage.
Yep.
So, of course, he freaks out about it. Now, he's still wrong. He absolutely is wrong. But at least I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah. So we have a shining moment for Eggwin in the midst of all this. Like, she stands her ground when Rand kind of like comes up and says, specifically about the hair, she stands her ground and she claims that she will be an Aes Sedai as soon as she reaches Tarvalon. And it's just...
Yeah, I don't know that Maureen has had a chance to explain novices yet, but you know.
Let alone accepted. And then, yeah. So, you know, props to Eggwin for standing her ground, but wow, can she just go off half-cocked sometimes.
Yeah. And we have that awkward moment of Rand calling Aes Sedai dark friends.
Maureen comes in.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, they're shouting at each other. Everyone's staring at them. Like, Rand really does a great job of putting his foot in his mouth in this book. More so, I think, than any other book. He is... in a lot of awkward situations.
Yeah. And we get this moment here, like where Matt is starting to feel comfortable. They've been running. They haven't seen any signs of anyone chasing them. And Matt says that maybe they've outrun the Trollocs.
And everything is fine.
If we've lost them, this is Perrin. Perrin like turns to Matt and says, if we've lost them, then why is Lan still scouting? Mm-hmm. And sometimes, especially in this first book, I think Perrin's the only one who has ounce of sense between the three of them.
Definitely.
Because Perrin's the only one who's like, dude, Matt, like, Lan would not be out there right now if they were, no.
Yeah, I think that's why the first time I read through the series, Perrin was one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Because he does have common sense. And, I mean, he is also super broody, and we'll talk about that later. But, my first time through, I was definitely on Team Perrin, specifically for moments like this, where he's like, okay, come on, get your shit together.
Come on, man. Yeah.
So we should talk about Maureens' threat.
Yeah.
Maureen basically threatens to kill them before letting the Dark One have them. And that's tense.
Because, her voice is so matter of fact, and that's what makes Rand realize that shit just got real. Like, Maureen made it very clear that it is better for them to die than to fall in the hands of the Dark One. And she's very much like...
And I will do it myself.
And don't press me.
Yeah. Which, again, from her perspective, makes sense. But since we don't know her perspective, that's creepy and messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's things like this. That's why we didn't trust Maureen for a while.
Exactly. Like,
and definitely why the boys don't trust Maureen.
She's not exactly the most stable, is she? That's what I thought.
She's not, touchy-feely, cuddly. Maureen's not the kind of person that welcomes being taken into her confidence or taking Maureen into your confidence. Like, she's not someone that you are necessarily going to get close to.
Yeah. She's there to get a job done, not make friends.
She is. So, back to Maureen and Eggwin. Again, talking about Aes Sedai and becoming Aes Sedai. We get all sorts of exposition about Aes Sedai. But Eggwin says that she's not afraid of becoming Aes Sedai, and Maureen says that it would be better if she was.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with Eggwin. She is never appropriately afraid.
Yeah.
And she's so determined. And this lack of fear coupled with her ambition kind of puts her into really bad situations. Because, she pushes herself so far and so quickly that if she were appropriately afraid, there would be a certain amount of reticence and she would hold herself back a little. Mm-hmm. But she just doesn't have that fear. She wants it so badly that even if she does have some of the fear, she stomps it down and ignores it completely and just rushes headlong into whatever situation.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, at the end, it's a good thing she's that kind of person, but...
Yeah, I mean, it certainly comes in handy.
But it's kind of frustrating here.
Yeah.
And so Maureen has this moment with Eggwin that's, like... It really... Like, every time I read this, it kind of, like... just resonates really clear and true to me. And she makes this comment that becoming an Aes Sedai will not change you from what you are. It's such an important thing to remember. Becoming a thing does not change who you are. Mm-hmm. It's allowing that thing to change you and shape you into something else that changes who you are.
Right.
It's
true. I mean, a lot of people have goals, and a lot of people have that thing that they want to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And they put so much of their effort, and there's so much wanting towards that thing. And they think, well, if I can just become this thing or reach this goal, then everything will be different. My whole life will change. And
right.
A lot of people actually end up very disappointed and very disillusioned when they do finally, reach that goal, mm-hmm. and they realize that they're still the same person. They're exactly who they were the day before. Right. And now they have to figure out what that means. So it is good. Maureen says something like, Aes Sedai are good and they're charitable, but they're also bitter and angry. Like there's wonderful people and there's kind of terrible people that mm-hmm. are all Aes Sedai.
Yes,
and being an Aes Sedai is not, going to determine what kind of person you are. What person you are is all these other things, and you just happen to be Aes Sedai. Right. So make sure that your character is who you want it to be, because becoming an Aes Sedai isn't going to change that. And
it's absolutely true.
Good advice for everybody. So they finally get to Berlin. And it's so funny how these, country bumpkins see Berlin as a real city. And Tom just rolls his eyes and is like, whatever. This fly speck is not a city.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's cute. And we see that Maureen and Lan use their aliases as, I believe it's Alice and Andra.
Alice? Yeah.
I think. We talked back in, I believe it was episode 2, that it was weird that Maureen was in Emmonsfield as herself, like
right.
fully, with her ring and dressed to the nines, proclaiming who she was. Because often when she travels, she uses these aliases and she hides who she is. Because, again, it's not safe to be out as an Aes Sedai.
Right.
Depending on where in the world she is.
Yeah, and Lan even hides his water cloak here.
He switches to a normal cloak, and they, transform into normal people, quote unquote normal.
Normal.
So we get to see her alias here.
So as they approach the town, we hear gossip from one of the gatekeepers about the Children of the Light, and they're in Berlin. Mm-hmm. And we also hear about the war between the false dragon Logan and the Aes Sedai going on in Gildan, and him marching to Tyr.
Right. And then Tom tells Rand about the significance of Tyr. Rand notices that once the gatekeeper is like, and he's going to Tyr, and he has emphasis on it, and Rand's like, I don't know what that means. So Tom tells him a bunch about the prophecies of the dragon and some of the things that need to be fulfilled, and about Tyr and about the sword that cannot be touched and all those things.
All of which will happen in book 3.
Right. We learned more.
So Lan and Maureen must have been to this inn several times because the way they're received.
Definitely.
Like the innkeeper just seems to more than recognize them. He acts like they've been here and they're good friends.
Well, and I mean, just because
patrons.
He doesn't get mad at them sneaking in through the back. Because
True.
Lan has to put his knife under and pop the lock. Because you're not even supposed to enter the gate that way.
Right.
And if they didn't have a good relationship with him,
he'd be like,
they would have been like, no, sorry, sir. Let's get the town guard over here.
Right.
So he definitely has a good relationship with them. Also, Rand notes specifically that Master Fitch is as big around as Master Alvair. And they talk about him having a round belly, which is our first mention of fat innkeeper's good, skinny innkeeper's bad. And that will come back. So anytime you stay at an inn, make sure your innkeeper is fat, because then you'll be safe. Otherwise, people are going to try to kill you.
So the next time you check in at the West Inn, remember this.
Exactly. Pulling up to the Marriott, being like, I need to check out the concierge. No, don't do that.
No, don't do it. No, they'll think you're weird. And that ends chapters 11, 12, and 13 of The Eye of the World. Next week's episode, we're going to go back to just 2. We're going to be covering chapters 14 and 15, where so much happens I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So you have to join us and find out.
Yay! We hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru.
We'll see you again next week. Make sure that you rate us and subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you grab your podcasts. Maybe leave us a positive review. It really helps us
to
find people find us when you give us reviews. And you can tweet us at Pod-Thru or email us at podthru@gmail.com and tell us your thoughts on anything that we covered today, or give us corrections or whatever. Let us know you said hi.
That's WOTPODTHRU@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, and we hope that the wheel weaves you in our direction again soon.